And we're live. Welcome back to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast, everyone. Now at our new time on Friday mornings. As always, I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I'm joined by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Friday mornings. Awesome. And we have a lot of interesting stuff to cover today. There are a
I'm good.
number of different stories, and we have a lot of interesting stuff to cover today. There are a
I'm good.
number of different stories.
We've got
We have a lot of interesting stuff to cover today. There are
I'm
a
good.
number of different stories.
got
We have a lot of interesting stuff to cover today. There are a
I'm good.
number of different stories.
We've got
We have a lot of interesting stuff to cover today. There are
I'm good.
You there, Seth? All right, I think we lost Seth there for a second, but I'm sure he's going to be back. So in the meantime, let me tell you guys about what stories we have coming up. So in addition to those Rivian e-bikes, we're learning about the RadWagon. We just covered the Lectric XP Trike, and here's Seth back.
Sorry about that.
No worries. And we've also got a few interesting three-wheeled electric vehicles, including the Peel P50 and also an electric tuk-tuk. But I think we're going to be starting off with Rivian e-bikes, if I'm not mistaken. So let's check out the e-bikes that Rivian is going to be rolling out, which unfortunately we don't have too much information yet, but we do finally have a confirmation from the CEO that this is definitely happening. You know, before we heard from RJ Scaringe that they're interested in e-bikes, it would be an interesting area to go into. We saw that they hired a few e-bike sort of superstars in the design world. They poached some people from Specialized and other companies. So we knew they were sort of e-bike curious, but we recently heard that the CEO announced in a company-wide meeting that they are already developing an electric bicycle. We don't know, exactly what type of bike this is. Is it going to be more of like a mountain bike, which a lot of these automotive companies have focused on? Are they going to do more of like a moped or almost a light electric motorcycle? Really, the details are still out there, and we're waiting for more there. But just the fact that the company has confirmed that they're definitely not only going to develop, but they're already in the process of developing an e-bike is huge news, because Rivian, of course, brings in massive design chops. This isn't some new electric bike company that's going to have to get off the ground or is just, white labeling a bike. Rivian can obviously design something interesting from the ground up, produce it in the US, and probably bring out some huge production numbers. Obviously, they're still scaling up production of their electric trucks and SUVs, but there's a lot less that goes into not only the design, but also the production of an e-bike, both on the material side and on the labor and parts side. So it's very interesting to see what they're going to be able to do here in e-bikes and how quickly they're going to be able to do it, especially as more and more automotive companies start to play around with e-bikes and throw their hat in the ring. I know you've got a little more experience with Rivian than I do, though, Seth. What do you think about a potential Rivian e-bike?
So they're definitely working on it. I've talked to a couple of Rivian employees, pretty high level, that have said, we can't really talk about it, but like here, you've seen that we are, patenting things, trademarking things. We have a big interest in it. The story that we're looking at here was one you did in October of last year at a conference, Disrupt 2022. Screen said the following: when you look at transportation over the next 10 to 15 years, core to part of the way we think about our product portfolio is increasingly that we go towards multimodal. We'll be using vehicles sometimes, public transportation other times, and we think increasingly e-bikes, electric assist bikes. I mean, that was pretty much, I almost think that the TechCrunch Disrupt was more of a tell than this Bloomberg thing. But the fact that after the 2 rounds of 6% layoffs, they're still talking about e-bikes, that's a good sign. And he continues, and for us to be part of that sort of mosaic of different mobility solutions, we have a whole host of products that a number of which are pretty far from what you see here, gesturing toward the trucks. And then the e-bike space is something we're super excited about. We haven't announced anything or said anything there, but I do think it's going to play an increasingly important role for transportation, both in the movement of goods for commercial purposes, but also for the movement of people. So the way he's talking about it there was similar to the way the employee talked about it with me. I don't think it's going to be like adventure bikes. Like it's not going to be something that, necessarily fits on the back of a Rivian, is an accessory to a Rivian, kind of like, what Porsche kind of does a little bit. And some of the other makers are making e-bikes or white labeling e-bikes so that they are accessories to their vehicles. I think Rivian is thinking about this as a form of transportation. They have experts in, batteries and motors and everything, and they see this e-bike space as a blowing up um, part of the travel or transportation ecosystem. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them come uh, at, almost like at what Harley and Serial are doing with, like, higher speed. Not what Harley and Serial and LiveWire are doing, um, but like kind of the prototypes they've shown off with, like, these, interesting uh, types of e-bikes and scooters that, don't really fit into any particular category. Obviously, if they're going to be legal on roads, they've got to be, VINed out or whatever, if they're going to go over 28 miles per hour. So that's what I think the interesting part. But I think Rivian is really thinking about, like, we're going to have an e-bike business. It's going to be a big part of our portfolio, and it's going to be, it's going to be part of who we are. So yeah, I think this is a big deal for Rivian, and Rivian is a big deal in the EV space. So we're following this quite closely.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to see how quickly this turns into something because, it's not just over the last few days or weeks that they've been working on this. So they
Right.
could have something pretty far along already.
Yeah. I mean, they could announce something any day now, and I think that's something that could really help their stock, which has been going up and down quite a bit. But if they release a good e-bike product, that they have another um, a money volcano, so to speak. And of course, their partnership with Amazon means that the distribution likely could be pretty easy for them.
Absolutely.
All right, next up we have eCoast, launched as a hassle-free electric beach cruiser bike with belt drive.
This one's interesting to me because most of the time when we think about beach cruiser bikes, we're thinking about West Coast, California cruising, that kind of thing. But this is a very nice beach cruiser that was launched by a New York-based company known as Priority Bicycles. And most people probably know Priority more for their pedal bikes than their electric bikes. But they have already a couple very nice electric bikes, and now they've taken their Coast model, which is their beach cruiser, and they've basically electrified it to turn it into the eCoast. And it's got some interesting parts here as well. Most beach cruisers, especially electric beach cruisers, are fairly simple, but we've got a Gates carbon belt drive on the eCoast here. We've got hydraulic disc brakes, and it's overall just a very nice setup. It's all stainless steel or rust resistant hardware, which of course is going to be very important for a bike that's actually ridden along the beach, and you've got that salt spray, and you want to be corrosion resistant. And it also comes in at a price that's sort of middle ground in the cruiser territory. I think it's $17.99 if I'm not mistaken, and that really falls in between sort of the cheaper Amazon style beach cruisers and the nicer Pedigo $2,500 $3,000 beach cruisers. So it's sort of that Goldilocks zone for me, especially when you look at some of the nicer parts it comes with, that it's not just an off the rack or out of the catalog cheap beach cruiser here. This is a fairly nicely spec'd, nicely designed model. The one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is the rear rack mounted battery.
Mm.
It's kind of like I don't know, like a 2016-ish design. I feel like that, a lot of companies have moved away from rack mounted batteries. But then again, there's not a lot of places to hide a battery on a beach cruiser, and having a really thick down tube like you would generally have an electric mountain bike to hide the battery would look really funny. So I guess I can see it. One of the things I like that electric bike company does for their beach cruisers is they offer a front basket battery so that you don't even have a rear rack battery. It just looks like a normal sort of like wicker or aluminum basket you'd put on the front of a beach cruiser, and you can't even tell that the battery's built into the bottom of the basket. So that's, in my opinion, kind of a nicer looking way to do it. But short of that, I guess a rear rack battery is one of the only options for a beach cruiser like this. So I'm not going to hold it against them too much. Overall, I very much like the bike, and I think it's going to be an interesting addition to this space, especially as that middle price but fairly nicely spec'd carbon drive beach cruiser. Your thoughts, Seth?
Yeah, so I agree on that. The back battery, Pedigo has a couple bikes with the back battery. I recently checked one out. They had a turn signal built into that one, which I thought was a nice, like if you're going to have a back battery, put something like that in there, make it worthwhile. And we can see on, if you're watching us, you can see that there's a pannier covering it in one of the pictures, and that kind of, from an aesthetic point of view, kind of makes it a little bit better. But you're right, like it's not just the way it looks; it's also the way it rides with the weight so high up and behind the rider. It makes the steering a little bit less, like I don't know, I guess sure-footed. But I'm sure this ride's fine. It's got all the stuff it needs. What are we talking about in terms of specs? In terms of the motor here, is it just 250 or
I think it's either 500 or 750.
okay?
It's a class 3 bike, so it does get up to 28, I believe.
Okay, and those fat
Um,
tires, it's going to have some power.
yeah, exactly. And I think those are 3-inch tires, if I'm not mistaken. So they're kind of that like nice middle ground as well.
Mm,
They're not like massive 4-inch fat tires, but they give you more cushion than like a 2.5-inch mountain bike tire, which is going to be important for a bike that doesn't have any suspension. So
right,
I
and it
kind of
goes on
miss.
sand as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I haven't seen bikes with these balloon tires in a while. It's funny because these used to be like the big tires before fat tires came out. So it's kind of nice to see a comeback of the 3-inch size.
Yeah. And then so it doesn't really have a gearing system because of the belt drive. Uh, Getting up to 28 miles per hour, how does that work with the pedal speed? I wonder what the cadence uh, you have to attain to get to 28 miles per hour is.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to be kind of mime pedaling at the top there. I was recently on the new BQI, which is a similar setup. It's a 28 mile per hour e-bike with a single speed belt drive. And I mean, there's no way that you can pedal at 28 miles per hour. Your feet look like, a dentist drill spinning that fast.
Yeah, the Luna Eclipse is also in that same boat. Also a belt drive. It has a 20-inch wheels. It's foldable ish, and anything over 20 miles per hour is throttle only. Really, you can try, but you just look silly. Well, this looks
Yeah.
great. Are you gonna have a review, or are they gonna? What's the delivery dates on these?
Yeah, so they already launched for pre-order. I don't believe they're shipping yet, but I'm not positive. I have been talking to the company, and they're going to get one out to my local bike shop so I can go take this thing for a test spin, take it down to the beach, and do some, nice prototypical beach cruiser type riding.
Cool. That looks like fun. And it'll be interesting to see what that weight on the back wheel does for the beach sand riding.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, moving on. The most popular cargo electric bike in the US is back after a major recall.
Yeah, it feels like it's been so much longer, but it's really only been a few months that the RadWagon has been unobtainable. Back in, I think it was November of last year, maybe October, there was a recall for most or all of the RadWagon 4s. It was like 30,000 e-bikes were all recalled for a wheel and tire issue. Apparently, there were two issues. One, that the sidewall would somehow like delaminate and could cause blowouts. And the second was that the rim strip was apparently not correctly installed on a bunch of the wheels and was causing flats that way. So Rad had recalled the Rad Wagon 4. It was out of commission for many months, but it is finally back. And not only have they started selling a new version of it with a presumably different or updated tire, but they've also started sending out repair kits to all of the people who had Radwagon 4s and were affected by this. So, I mean, again, like we're talking like 30,000 bikes out there. So there were a lot of people that were waiting months with a bike that, looked fine, but that they were told you shouldn't be riding this just in case. So it's nice to see that they've finally got those out there, because I know there was a lot of resentment building up about people that were saying, "Hey, I'm got this bike sitting here. I paid a lot of money for it and I can't ride it." So to see the kits going out and people able to finally get their bikes back to working, in addition to having the RadWagon 4 back for sale, I'm sure is sweet news for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting. The, I can't remember. Is this the bike that has the weird size tire that only Rad makes?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that was part of the part of the
Yeah.
problem, is that they kind of had their own tire here. So when they had an issue with it, it wasn't like they could just switch to a different tire real quick. And also consumers couldn't just go out and buy a different tire. It was that 22-inch size. So they were kind of stuck waiting on red.
Yeah. So that's a one of those cautionary tales. We kind of, when this launched, we were kind of like, well, the good thing is that this is a tire size built exactly for this bike. But the bad news is if something goes wrong, as a consumer, you're a little bit screwed. And as a company, Rad was a little bit screwed as well when something did go wrong. So cautionary tale, like maybe Rad will think twice about releasing bikes with their own newly spec tires. Now, this might be a little bit controversial. Do you think this had anything to do with the CEO shakeup at Rad?
I doubt it. I don't have any, insider information there, but I imagine that, for one, Mike had been running this company for years and years, and he really preferred to be on the product side.
Hmm.
Um, and I think, just the day in, day out of running things was probably preventing him from doing some of the, prototyping and design that he really enjoyed doing. And also with, some pretty significant institutional investors behind Rad now, they might have been interested in bringing in a more seasoned CEO who's led tech companies before, which is quite common in tech startups, that the CEO who starts the company doesn't always remain the CEO forever.
Right. Well, it's good to see these back on the road, back for sale. These are some of the most popular bikes out there. Rad is obviously the biggest, if not, one of the biggest uh, bike dealers out there. So I know we've recommended this bike to a lot of people. So glad to see that it's back in action. Moving over to another popular bike brand, Lectric XP Trike first ride, testing the low-cost electric trike made for everyone.
Yeah, this one has probably been a thorn in Rad's side. Speaking of Rad, just before this, the new Lectric XP Trike came out about a month or so, or was announced a month or so after the Rad Trike, at a significantly lower price. Now, it only went on sale a few days ago, but we did get a chance to go out to Phoenix and test this out. So this is my first ride experience. I only had a day on it, so I'm hoping to do a full review in another month or two when these things start shipping and they have production versions. But for now, there's, I believe, exactly one of these, which is basically a production prototype. And I got the chance to go try this sucker out and see what it's like. And so, for a trike that basically undercuts the Rad trike by $1,000, I was pretty impressed. I would say it doesn't have some of the fit and finish of Rad's bike. It's not quite as stable. You can see I was doing donuts there, and it feels pretty good, but you can get it up on two wheels and get that third wheel in the air a little bit if you take too sharp of a turn. Though you really got to be hammering into those turns to do it. But all in all, I would say that for $1,500, you get a lot of vehicle here. It's pretty nicely designed with two-wheel drive in the back, thanks to the motor being mounted in sort of a mid-drive setup on the jack shaft, which means that it goes through that differential rear axle and drives both wheels. It's also a folder, which means that if you need to fit it in, the back of an SUV or something, but you don't want to fold down that last row of seats, or you can't fold down your seats, then you can probably still get it in there, which is nice. And it also has a second benefit of meaning that when it does start shipping to consumers, it'll arrive folded up, fully assembled. So you don't have to start bolting together things and making sure that you assembled the bike correctly. That's all all done for you. In terms of specs, it's pretty standard across the industry. These things generally top out about 14, 15 miles an hour. The motor is 500-watt continuous, but man, that thing is way more powerful than you would expect for a 500-watt motor. It actually puts out over 1,000 watts peak. And I climbed up this huge hill in this thing that was like hard to walk up.
Mm.
So, I mean, I was just amazed at how much torque that thing was putting out, which, blew my mind there. So I don't think that anyone's going to have a problem when it comes to hills or power. And if anything, I would say it's very nicely balanced, because if you keep it in a low pedal assist, like 1 or 2, it's just real gentle. But if you want to, really climb a hill or have more power, it's got it there if you put it in the higher power modes for sure.
And it's class 2, so it's got a throttle.
Yeah, it's got a throttle. Obviously, it doesn't max out the Class 2 speed, but it's still considered a Class 2 e-bike because of that.
Uh-huh.
But you don't have to use the throttle. And if anything, I think this is great for people that want to get back into pedaling, because you don't have to use your legs for balance. You can, use a higher level of pedal assist if you just want a little bit of exercise. And for someone who wasn't very active before, this could be a great way to get a little more fitness, a little more outdoor activity into their daily lives.
And we talked about this before, but like, when you have a trike that, has a throttle and, is super easy to get on, like both this and the Rad, I think is even easier because the tires are a little smaller. Uh, it's almost like you're like bridging the gap between, maybe you don't want one of those, old person rascal scooters to ride around with. You could probably get one of these, and you'd be more hip than the rascal folk, and maybe on some similar level as the bikers. Uh, so I really like this idea of having a thing that maybe you don't throw a lot of torque in those pedals, but you're moving your legs around. You know, you're pushing your weight around, you're steering, getting fresh air, you're riding around. I think this is a really good product. I think it's kind of like an underserved product right now. I don't see a lot of, I don't see a lot of trikes around, but I imagine that the people who, kind of don't feel comfortable on bikes, but they don't need a rascal yet. I feel like that's a big market, and I don't think anybody's really addressed it until now with both Rad and Electrek getting into a lower cost, higher quality uh, thing. Now, I have to ask you, since you're probably one of the only people on earth who've ridden both of these, like which one, like is the Rad worth the extra $1,000? Like what like compare the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people ask me, like, where does that extra $1,000 go? Especially when you consider a couple of things, that the electric has hydraulic brakes, which the Rad doesn't, and
Mm,
that it has about a 40% larger battery. So a lot
wow.
of people are like, well, like, what gives here? And so there are some major differences. I would say that the Rad trike, not only does it have a little bit better fit and finish, but it's also designed more ground up to be a trike, whereas with Lectric XP Trike, it seems like they sort of took their really popular XP line, like the XP Lite and the XP 3.0, and they sort of added what's effectively like a trike kit on the back, like you could actually add on to a pedal bike, and so that's what you've got there.
Hmm.
That's in the back, almost like a normal two wheeler with a trike rear end. Um, uh, that gives it a couple of downsides. For one, it's probably not going to be quite the same ride feel as the steel framed Rad Trike, which is all built as basically one big frame, and it's got that flex that you would expect out of steel. And for two, it's going to put the center of gravity a bit higher, because with Rad's design, not only do they have smaller wheels, but their cargo platform is lower as well. So you've got a little bit more stable setup on the Rad Trike, wider base in the rear, lower center of gravity. And I think for most people, they're going to feel that it's just, a little more stable in the turns. But I got to say, both of them, I had no issue taking turns as long as I didn't, just go like hog wild with the thing. So I'd say Rad's, it's probably a bit nicer design trike, but the Lectric XP Trike, you definitely get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking is like, to get to the next level with these, and I know neither of them have it, but like, what if there was you're going 14 miles per hour, you shouldn't be allowed to turn the wheel like any more than a certain degree, because otherwise you're flopping over on the side. Like, I wonder if there's a way. I mean, it doesn't seem like a hard engineering problem. Like, just don't allow a certain number of degrees of turning per whatever. And I guess like you could turn that off because some people want to ride on two wheels or do crazy stuff. But I think about the generation above me, and like they probably enjoy it. But then what if they're going 14 miles per hour and decide to make a left turn and they forget they're on a tricycle, and bad things happen. Um, so that's something I think about. And also like obviously the rad trike. Um, It doesn't have a basket in the back, but it does have that seat with the backup. Is that a option for the electric?
Yeah, so apparently that's going to be part of the cargo package, and that's sort of an interesting trade-off here. Is that at least for now, the Lectric XP Trike does come with the rear basket, and it does not come stock with the rear, like I guess, back supported seat.
Hmm.
I believe that's going to be an add-on with the comfort package. But with the Rad Trike, you do get the nicer seat, but you have to pay extra for the rear basket.
Okay. Very interesting space. We're gonna keep an eye on it. Moving on, we've got Harley Davidson's upcoming LiveWire electric motorcycle delayed until next year or later this year.
Yeah, this is a bit of a bummer because we were supposed to see the Del Mar coming out this spring sometime, but now we've learned that Livewire's second electric motorcycle is not going to come out until the second half of the year. Whenever they say second half of the year, the cynical part of me thinks like, all right, we're talking November, December
Yeah,
here.
like maybe we'll get a couple in before Christmas.
Yeah. So they also revised their sales estimates. They were expecting to do, I think, up to 7,000 units this year, and they've revised that from between 500 to 2,000 units because they're going to have less of the year to sell in. That if they're thinking they're going to do at least 500, then I guess they're not going to roll it out on like Christmas because that'd be some pretty good sales in that last week of December.
Right.
But it does make me worry that they're if they've dropped the forecast that drastically that they're expecting a much later rollout this year. Maybe they'll surprise us and it'll come out in August, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think that's realistic. I mean, they already have enough orders to fill that out, right? So it's basically how many come off the line, and what period does it take them to make 500 to 2,000 bikes? And that kind of feels like if things are pumping up, a month or so makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I have to wonder, what the holdup is here. We've known this bike is coming for a while. I don't know if it's, related to chip shortage things, supply chain constraints gets thrown around a lot. And obviously there are a
Right.
lot of parts that go into these bikes, whether it's, battery cells shortage. It could be one little thing that, all these bikes need, and that causes a several month delay here. So it's hard to say what's going on, but it's significantly going to impact the potential revenue for Livewire for 2023, which was expected to be a big year for the company, especially after 2022 wasn't necessarily an amazing year financially for Livewire. It's interesting. They did something like, I want to say like 12 million or so in sales for the Livewire 1, which is currently their only electric motorcycle model, but they actually did twice as much revenue with their kids' balance bikes. So, right now, Livewire is making like two-thirds of their revenue from selling kids' bikes, believe it or
That's
not.
crazy. The ones with the drill motors, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. They're doing
Yeah.
like, I think it's $30 million a year or something
That
in kids'
that
balance
is
bikes.
that's amazing. I mean, that's like, Tesla selling tequila. It doesn't really, or Tesla selling kids motorcycles, or kids cars, I guess. Uh
Yeah, absolutely.
it's a
Whoever made the
shame.
decision to buy Stasic a couple years ago Like they made a good call because that's paying the bills right now.
Right. I mean, I guess the brand, they're kind of, cashing out on the brand a little bit by, making little Harleys or little live wires for kids. But you get them young.
There you go.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a bummer though, but because this is, obviously a very sought after bike, especially with the lower price and the upgraded looks.
Yeah, I'm still excited for the future of this bike, and I think this is still going to be what cements LiveWire as a competitive electric motorcycle brand. But it is a bit frustrating to see them sort of, fumbling right before the finish line here of getting that popular model out.
Yep. All right. Good luck to them. I'm tempted to get a motorcycle license just so I can try out a Delmar. All
Do
right.
it.
I know. I know. Well, when they have electric motorcycles that I can take the test in, then it'll be much easier. And we've talked about that before. But moving on, I bought an electric tuk-tuk to drive in a first world country, and it's a perfect city truck.
This has been so much fun. So I bought this thing maybe like 6 weeks ago or something. I don't even remember now, but it is such a cool vehicle to have in the city. For those of you that don't know, I actually live in Tel Aviv most of the year, so that's where I have it here. And it is basically it serves almost the role of a pickup truck for me, but in a much smaller format. So the bed is a little bit smaller than a pickup's bed, though I had it parked next to a small truck and it wasn't that much smaller. It's
Really?
just it's just the rest of the vehicle that's much smaller.
It looks quite small.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like over half bed, so it's only 10 feet long, so it's like a 5.5 foot bed or something like that. And I think that's probably like comparable to Cybertruck Rivian beds, where they like 6 feet long, something like that.
Yeah.
So this thing is, I mean, basically it's a motorcycle up front and a truck bed in the back. If you've never seen a tuk-tuk before, it's basically like two vehicles stuck together. And so it's got motorcycle controls. You sit on what's effectively a bench, but you've got handlebars, you've got brakes on the handlebars, a twist throttle. So it really feels like a motorcycle or rather a tricycle when you're up there. But all the magic happens in the back. And that's where not only is it a normal truck bed with like a tailgate, but the sides actually fold down as well. They're like side gates. So it turns into a flatbed truck, which is a really cool feature if you're carrying, big things like a couch or, 4x8 foot sheets of drywall or plywood, something like that. So it's really got a lot of utility, but at the same time, it's still super small for the city. So like I can lane split with this thing, which I've done before. There'll be like, 30 cars lined up at a red light, and I'll just go like right down the side to the front of the red light, which
What's
by
the
the way
width?
is it's a little bit over a meter. It's like 110. So that's I think 3.5 feet, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's probably narrower than some of those massive, like a Honda Goldwing motorcycle or something.
Right.
And yeah, it's like, so there I am lane splitting. Um, and for the city, we talk a lot about like, massive trucks and SUVs in the cities, and this idea that as cars get bigger and bigger, they become more dangerous to pedestrians. And so, if anything, what I really love about this is that it gives me the utility of having a small truck in a city, but in a much smaller, much safer, less dangerous, less impactful vehicle. It's of course it's electric, so I'm not, spewing carcinogens into the air, but it's also a lot cheaper. I don't have to fill it up with gas. I don't have to do maintenance. I'm not, changing the oil, swapping air filters, not doing any of the stuff that you associate with having like a work truck around. And so to me, this has just been a sort of super effective utility vehicle to have in a city without having to get a real car. And because of the street legal status here, it fits into this weird like gray area that is sort of overlapping with mobility scooters. And it means I don't have to get insurance for it. I don't have to register it. I don't need a plate. I don't even need a driver's license technically. And I don't have to pay to park it. So like it's all the advantages of a bike with the utility of a like small truck. And to
Yeah. I
me,
mean, it's
like, I
pretty
mean, this is
compelling.
just,
There.
sorry, go on.
Yes. Sorry, I think we have a little bit of lag on the audio, but to me, it kind of brings the same concerns about the three wheel things that we were talking about with the electric tricycles. Like driving it on a street. Um, do you ever go up on two wheels? Do you ever have to slow down more than you would imagine? What's that like?
Yeah, so I've never gotten up on two wheels. It's surprisingly stable for a Delta trike with two wheels in the back. Part of that is I think the batteries are so low and so heavy that you really have to take a sharp turn to get up on two wheels in this thing. They are lead acid batteries, which is the one major downside here is that I have to, try to remember to not let them discharge below 50%. And I know they're not going to last, 5, 6 years like a lithium ion battery would, but they keep it super stable. Um, the other thing though is that I don't really get going that fast because the suspension is not ideal.
Mm,
So like if you hit a speed bump or something, you really want to slow down. Otherwise, you're just like your butt's leaving the seat kind of situation.
yeah. Um, and you mentioned the legality of it in Tel Aviv. It's pretty legal, or they don't they don't really frown upon it. I
Yeah,
don't
there's
imagine in the U.S. it would be the same.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, these things in the US would fit into motorcycle class vehicles, and they'd have to be, NHTSA approved with all of the proper DOT components and stuff. So, unfortunately, in the US and most places, this isn't going to cut it unless you can fit it into one of those like weird limited use vehicle statutes, which some states have. But here in Tel Aviv, where it is legal, I mean, these are just like first of all, they're super popular. Like there's must be thousands of them in Tel Aviv. They're used by
Really?
delivery riders, couriers. You see them a lot going around and picking up all those rental scooters and like redistributing them or bringing them to the depots. But definitely for like supermarkets and stuff that are always restocking, and especially the smaller supermarkets, like the equivalent of a bodega kind of thing, they use these a lot for bringing in products. So they're just, I mean, they're all over and they're super convenient in a city.
Yeah. And so, talk to us about the power and the top speed, and you're dealing with lead acid batteries. Do you have an upgrade plan, or are you going to do solar or anything like that?
For sure, yeah. So it's about 4,000 watts, and it theoretically has a top speed of 28 miles per hour. But the vendor was like, "I don't recommend you riding it at 28 miles an hour."
That's
Um,
nice.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know how fast I've gotten it up to because I haven't really pushed it that fast. I mean, I've been at city speed, so probably like 20 miles an hour.
Hmm.
And so, it's got enough power to do it. I've climbed up some hills that were like parking garage hills, and it seems to do just fine. It also has a low gear. So if you're on a super steep hill, you can cut the speed in half but double the torque, which is nice. So it's, it seems to have enough power for anything I'd want to do. In terms of range, I haven't pushed it again because they're lead acid batteries and they degrade quicker when you go below 50%. It should have something like 25 to 30 miles of range, but my whole city is like 6 miles across. So like I
Right.
don't need it to go that far. And then I just recharge it in the parking garage when I'm done using it. But my goal is to actually add solar to it. I want to weld up a like structure for the bed that I can hopefully get 400 or 500 watts of solar panels. I already ordered 500-watt panels from AliExpress. So I'm going to try and get all five of them up there if they'll fit. And then I can have a covered bed and probably have the solar panels extend out over the canopy. And that way I don't even have to worry about plugging it in the parking garage because technically I don't think I'm supposed to plug into those spots. I think they use the outlets there for running the like cleaning like little like Zambonis for the
Mm,
parking garage kind of thing.
right.
So I'm kind of just like guerrilla charging when no one's watching. So if
Right.
I put the solar on it, then I can just park it outside for a day and it'll charge all the way up with 8 hours of sun.
Yeah, it looks like you could. I mean, you already ordered five 100-watt solar panels, but it looks like a perfect size for like one rooftop solar panel, which are 400 or 500 watts. So pretty similar.
Yeah, I was thinking
Um,
about going with one of those roof ones, but
mhm,
they're usually glass, and based on the
yeah,
suspension, I figured it would just like rattle the glass into shards.
right. Yeah, you would definitely need to put some suspension, I guess, on the roof rack. And the 100-watt panels, they come out 12 volt, and you do those like in series, so you get like 48 volts.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd run those in series. I think they even get up closer to like 18 when the sun's like, pretty well shining. So it'll probably be closer to like 90 volts when it's all said and done. But you can just run that into an MPPT charge controller, and it does its magic to put that into whatever voltage the batteries need, which I think is 60 volts if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. And then have you priced out what a lithium upgrade would be on this one?
I haven't yet, partly because I'm kind of dreading how much it's gonna cost.
Yeah. Cool. I really like this idea. I wish there was a classification in the U.S. I guess there's the neighborhood electric vehicle. This would kind of fall under, um, but I don't think these have VINs or any of the Department of Transportation approved stuff that you would need. But too bad.
Yep.
All right. Last story. This DIY kit lets you build your own street legal tiniest car in the world.
So if you're not familiar with the Peel P50, and then I hope you're actually watching the video here and not just listening to the podcast because you kind of got to see this thing. If I tried to describe it, I'd say it's almost looks like a suitcase with a windshield, and that's also about the size of it because it's a one-seater car. It's got a single door on the left side, and it's basically if you like had someone sit down in a folding chair and just like drew an outline of their body, that's the size and shape of this car. These were produced in the 60s on the Isle of Man, and it holds the Guinness World Record for the smallest production automobile in the world. So they went out of production in 1965, but there's a new company that now creates kits so that you can build your own Peel P50, and they have an electric drivetrain. They also have a gas version, but I can't imagine wanting to be in a tiny little box with an operating gas powered engine with you. So the electric one is definitely what you're going to want to go with here. And I just think this is the coolest thing that you can build your own kit car replica of an original Peel P50. And it's not only do you get to build a replica, but these are apparently legal in the UK and the US. They're produced in the UK, but in the US, the company says they fit into motorcycle designation in most states. And I guess they've gone through the trouble of making sure that they've got DOT lights, they've got the proper turn signal spacing, all the issues that go along with making a street legal motorcycle, which is certainly easier than a street legal car that they've done. And so theoretically, if you've got like 12,000 bucks, you can assemble your own world's tiniest electric car and be driving that sucker around on the streets.
That's crazy. And again, for people who aren't watching the video, there's a picture of a guy in an elevator. Obviously, I think this was part of a stunt that like Top Gear in the UK did like a couple hundred years ago, where they went up into their office and drove around between desks and stuff. It's that small. Basically, like you said, it's like sit down in a lawn chair and have somebody put like metal around you, and that's kind of what you get. But uh we love this kind of stuff. I think in an urban environment maybe these make sense, especially on a rainy day when you don't want to get wet. Parking these things would be super easy. um you could probably lane split in them as well if you get going that speed. uh yeah, I mean, maybe instead of working with an old model, you make a one that's kind of built today, maybe a little bit more aerodynamic, maybe a little bit safer. I don't know how safe these things are, but yeah, love the idea. And of course, putting it together yourself, you're going to learn a lot about it. That means it's probably very easy to upgrade. You can put a Lily battery in there and get some good speed. So Love to see it. All right, we're gonna jump into the comments here. Let me pull over here. All right, we've got a few. If anybody has any comments or questions for us, please leave them on YouTube now, and we'll try to get them by the end of the show. So first one from Ryan Dalgarno: is this the all new electric truck?
Oh, that was the
And
Rivian story.
yeah, and no, I don't think it's the truck. It's definitely an e-bike. Although we've seen kind of the gradient between electric bikes and electric trucks. So maybe, Rivian says, hey, we know how to do a pickup truck. We'll make a tuk-tuk for the US. Who knows?
I could see it.
So Ryan also is an E-Dash fan. He says E-Dash makes a rack-mounted bike. My bike has tires like that. And my E-Dash goes 25, 30 miles per hour, sometimes 40.
Wow.
All right. That sounds fun. We've got, looks like a Serbian name without any vowels. Serbian. I'm not going to even try it. I like so much Rad Power bikes, and I hope will be available in Serbia one day. Yeah, where is Rad available today?
So,
I know I've seen them in Europe.
yeah, they're in much of Europe, like France, Netherlands, I think Germany, but they're not in most of Eastern Europe. So I don't believe they're in Serbia. It sounds like Serdin Nezic confirms they're not in Serbia yet. I had to try it.
Yeah.
But I could see them expanding there. I mean, they're such a dominant force in North America that why not take the bikes that already work well there and get them in as many countries as you can.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's like third-party importers in Serbia that would be happy to do the legwork for Rad and others. All right,
Absolutely.
one last question, unless anybody else chimes in. When it becomes too windy, it might be smart to roll down the windows to prevent being blown over. I think we're talking about the
The Peel P50.
yeah, that it applies to a couple of vehicles we talked about, the tuk-tuk and the DIY. So, yes, the windows being rolled down would help it from being blown over.
That's true. I will say though that at least it's a tadpole trike design with the two front wheels, so it is a little more stable. I mean, I guess if the wind's blowing from the side, it doesn't matter where the wheels are, but at least in turns, it's more stable than it looks. I'll give it that.
That's good to know. All right, that's all the comments today.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be back 2 weeks from now at our new time on Friday mornings, and we'll be excited to see you back next time. Take care, everyone.